It's no secret that Ukraine has targeted Russia's aerial defense units throughout the Ukraine war. Doing so allows Ukraine to carve safe aerial pathways within its own territory and, ideally, into Russia itself. However, these strikes have usually been conducted via Ukraine's missiles and drones. Now, the game has changed. Ukraine has somehow figured out how to strap US-made HARM missiles to its Soviet-era Su-27 fighter jets. And now that it knows how, it's gone and done this to Russia. On June 2nd, both Military and Defense Express reported that Ukraine had managed to do the unthinkable. Using a Su-27 fighter jet loaded with US-made AGM88 HARM missiles, Ukraine managed to take out a Russian air defense unit. That shouldn't have been possible. The HARM is made for US aerial platforms such as the F-16 and FA-18 Hornet. Their electronics aren't compatible with Soviet-era fighter jets, but Ukraine managed to figure out a way to make it happen. We'll cover exactly how later in the video. First, the attack. Defense Express reports that a recent Ukrainian combat mission saw Ukraine take out one of Russia's surface-to-air missile or SAM systems as part of a wider fighter operation somewhere on Ukrainian territory. We don't know precisely where the strike took place, but we do know that Ukraine used the HARM, which is built to home in on an enemy target's radar emissions, to take out the Russian SAM system's ammunition stores. But this wasn't random, it was surgical, and the unit behind it, legendary. According to Military, Ukraine's 39th Tactical Aviation Brigade carried out the attack. That brigade has already accomplished plenty of impressive feats during the war. Falling under the command of Ukraine's Air Command Center, the brigade is based in Ozerny, which is home to the Zhytomyr Oblast. Based on that, we can assume that the June 2nd strike took place somewhere in that location. Their base gives us a clue, but their history tells the real story. The 39th Tactical Aviation Brigade was born from the Soviet Air Force's former 894th Fighter Aviation Regiment, and is tasked with operating Ukraine's Su-27 fighter jets and its Aero L-39 Albatros aircraft. And right from the beginning of Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion, the brigade has stood out. On February 24th, it was 39th Tactical Aviation Brigade pilots who were among the first to respond to Russia's initial aerial threat. In some cases, those responses had deadly consequences. One Su-27 pilot named Eduard Mykolayevich Vorovsky was killed in action while fighting against Russia during this initial response, leading to him being awarded Ukraine's highest military honor, the Hero of Ukraine medal. Another pilot named Dmytro Valerievich Kolomiets used his L-39 to distract incoming Russian aircraft, only to also be shot down. Heroism seems to run in the blood of the 39th Tactical Aviation Brigade. Several other members of the unit have since been killed during the fighting against Russia, making the 39th Tactical Aviation Brigade as one that Ukraine trusts to carry out some of its most high-risk operations. That's exactly what we saw on June 2nd. Using an outdated Su-27, a 39th Tactical Aviation Brigade pilot flew directly into the range of an air defense system built to take it down. Avoiding fire from that system, it unleashed a weapon that it was not even supposed to be able to carry to decimate that air defense unit. This is a remarkable achievement, and Ukraine was quick to laud it. Military reports that one blog associated with Ukraine's Air Force said, "A Cossack on a Su-27, carrying out a covert mission for the strike group. He did the job well. First confirmed target for the baby." That's an interesting statement. The blog may be telling us that the pilot who just destroyed the Russian air defense system was on his first mission. Or it may be telling us that this was the first recorded instance of a Ukrainian Su-27 using a HARM. Perhaps it's both. What we know for sure is that there's footage of this amazing encounter. Shared on YouTube, the 30-second clip is low quality, making it difficult to tell exactly what type of air defense unit Ukraine just destroyed. Based on the HARM's ability to hone in on a target's radar systems, combined with the missile's behavior after launch, Military suggests that Ukraine just took out either a buck or Tor. Both are dangerous, and we'll explain why later in the video. Back to the footage, the clip starts with a view of the Ukrainian countryside, shot by a reconnaissance drone. All seems to be quiet, with nothing happening for the first 7 seconds. Then explosions. A series of them run in sequence, causing flames to fire into the air. At the 8-second mark, what appears to be Russian missiles intended to be fired by its air defense system go streaking away from the main explosion, confirming that Ukraine's HARM managed to hit the ammunition store. The rest of the footage simply shows Ukraine's target engulfed in smoke, a reminder to Putin that his air defense systems are never safe. Military says that it's rare for such footage to emerge. Up until this point, it says, Ukraine has mostly used HARM missiles to suppress Russia's air defenses and to disrupt activity along the front line. The key word here is suppression. Ukraine doesn't tend to use the HARM to completely destroy Russia's air defense units, instead firing the missiles to distract those units, while other Ukrainian munitions cause damage. Alternatively, Ukraine will fire HARMs into a general target area and allow the missile's homing capabilities to guide it independently toward any source of radio frequency emission. What we see in the YouTube footage is rare. So rare that it may not have ever happened before. That's according to Army Recognition, which says that this footage represents the very first confirmed combat usage of a HARM missile by a Ukrainian Su-27. It says that the footage illustrates the growing technical ability of Ukrainian defense engineers to integrate NATO standard weaponry into Soviet-era airframes. That naturally raises questions about how Ukraine managed to pull this remarkable attack off. That's a question we'll answer later in the video. Before that, let's take a closer look at HARM, along with the two types of Russian air defense systems Ukraine might have destroyed. The AGM88 HARM, which stands for High-Speed Anti-Radiation Missile, is an advanced weapon designed to target and destroy enemy radar systems used for aerial defense, says Army Recognition. Development on HARM began in the late 1970s, with the first model of the missile being introduced in the early 1980s, with an official introduction to the United States Air Force coming in 1985. The HARM first came to prominence during the Gulf War, when the US used it to destroy Iraq's radar installations, and has proven itself time and time again since, to the point where the missile has been adopted by several countries. Beyond Ukraine, Australia, Germany, Italy, Saudi Arabia, Taiwan, and many others have implemented HARM into their air forces. A HARM missile measures 13 feet and 8 inches long, has a 10-inch diameter, and a wingspan of 3 feet and 7 inches. The missile weighs about 800 pounds and features a modular design that allows for simple modifications to be made. It may be this modular design that has allowed Ukraine to configure the missile for use with its Su-27s. We'll find out later. When it comes to firepower, HARM packs a 150-pound high-explosive fragmentation warhead into its missile body. The warhead is custom designed to destroy electronic equipment and radar installations, Army Recognition says. The missile itself is capable of exceeding Mach 2, and with some of its variants, reaching Mach 2.9. That's quick enough to evade most air defense systems built during the era in which HARM was first developed. It also has a range of about 30 miles, though not long enough to allow Ukraine's fighter jets to hover outside the range of Russia's air defense systems. That range is enough to allow for rapid engagement that makes it harder for an enemy to react to the incoming threat a HARM poses. However, it's the guidance system packed into HARM that is perhaps the missile's most impressive feature. It's remarkably simple. HARM leverages a passive radar seeker that's capable of detecting and homing in on the radio frequency emissions generated by a radar system. That tracking capability lends the missile a level of autonomy that many others don't have. A HARM user can simply fire the missile in a general combat area, as Ukraine has been doing regularly up to the June 2nd strike, and leave the missile itself to do the work. It'll track any radar systems within the combat area and make a beeline for them. Even more impressively, HARM can still hit a target even if that target detects the missile's launch and turns off its radar. Of course, the missile isn't solely autonomous. If Ukraine wants, it can program its HARM missiles with target priority settings that allow it to seek out specific types of radar signals on a complex battlefield. In other words, if there's a specific type of air defense unit Ukraine wants to hit, it can program HARM to prioritize the radar signals that the desired system emits ahead of all others. It's a very impressive weapon, and HARM was the perfect choice for taking out the Buk or Tor air defense systems Militani suggests were the likely targets based on the footage we mentioned earlier. The Buk 3, which has also been nicknamed the Viking, is a medium-range SAM system that consists of 2 transporter erector launcher and radar vehicles and 1 standard transporter erector launcher. You may have just gotten a clue about why Militani thinks that the Buk 3 was Ukraine's target. 2 of the platform's launchers use radar, which the HARM could have homed in on to take them out. And if that's the case, it's a big win for Ukraine. The Buk M3 fires radar-guided SAM missiles that have a target destruction probability of 99.9% and can travel for up to 43 miles. Astonishingly, Army Recognition says that these missiles can hit a maximum speed of 3,000 meters per second, roughly equivalent to Mach 8.7, and more than fast enough to take out almost any aerial platform that comes within range. That alone highlights how impressive Ukraine's Su-27 strike was. Remember that the HARM has a range of about 30 miles. The Buk M3's 43-mile range means the Su-27 had to fly within the sights of a missile system that fires missiles far faster than the fighter jet can fly. Huge amounts of risk was involved, and the Su-27 still managed to pull off its mission if it was indeed a Buk M3 it took out on June 2nd. The other system Ukraine might have destroyed is the Tor M2DT. A short-range SAM missile system, the Tor M2DT was designed specifically for use in the Arctic region, as we can see from its white-based camouflage and the tracks that mark it out as a mobile air defense unit. The system comes mounted with a missile launcher on its roof, which is equipped with a pair of 9 M334 modules that each contain 4 SAM missiles. And there's the radar, mounted on the Tor's turret. That radar can scan for targets up to 15.5 miles away across a 360-degree radius. That radar makes the Tor an ideal target for Ukraine's HARM missiles. No matter which of these air defense units Ukraine hit, Putin now has a major problem. The very radars those systems rely upon to identify and take out incoming aerial threats are now being used against them by old Ukrainian fighter jets that have somehow been equipped with US-made HARM missiles. That shouldn't be possible, but it is, and we're about to explain how. The truth is that Ukraine has been trying to figure out how to configure HARM to work with its Soviet-era aerial platforms almost since the beginning of Putin's invasion. Back in September 2022, the Aviationist reported that Ukraine had figured out how to do just that, first with its MiG-29 fighters and then later with its Su-27s. Visual confirmation of this feat came via the Polymarket Intel X account, which published a picture of an Su-27 carrying a pair of HARM missiles attached to pylons on its wings. Still, that didn't answer the question of how Ukraine pulled this off. That answer came via the Historic Wings YouTube channel on September 4, 2022. The mystery was clear for all to see. To the layman, it would seem like any missile could be hung from the pylons attached to any fighter jet's wings. That's technically the case, but placing a missile in a pylon doesn't mean the jet can fire that missile. Every aircraft has its own electronic systems, and those systems need to be compatible with the weapons those aircraft use. The Su-27 is a Soviet-era Russian-made jet. HARM, along with many of the other missiles Ukraine's partners provide, are designed for NATO-aligned aircraft. The two shouldn't go together. Historic Wings points out that special missile-targeting computers are needed to fire a missile. The HARM and the Su-27 would need a compatible data bus, with the jet also needing the appropriate in-cockpit displays to allow the pilot to determine targets and fire the HARM. This can all be done. Ukraine had the option of replacing the Russian electronics in its fighter jets with Western kits that would make its Su-27s, along with its other Soviet fighter jets, compatible with HARM. But that replacement is a process that would have taken years in good circumstances, and likely much longer during an active war. Ukraine didn't have that time. Yet it somehow managed to solve the compatibility problem 6 months into the war. How? Theories swirled as soon as the first photographs of MiG-29s and Su-27s carrying HARM missiles surfaced. We knew that the photographs weren't performative. Ukraine wasn't faking compatibility to scare Russia. Historic Wings notes that around the time the photos first emerged, Russia had already started recovering twisted pieces of HARM missile fins amidst wreckages of some of its radar sites. The Aviationist reported on one of those instances in August 2022, sharing a photograph published to the OSINT Technical X account that showed a fragment of a HARM missile with identifying information that had reportedly been fired at a Russian position. The point here is that Ukraine had not only solved the compatibility issue, but was using HARM missiles even before the first photos of them connected to Su-27s surfaced. Still, that didn't stop some from accusing Ukraine of faking the photographs, Historic Wing says. However, those rumors were quickly quashed when the US confirmed that it was supplying Ukraine with HARM missiles on August 9th. There would be no reason to send any of these missiles, which have a unit cost of $200,000 each, if Ukraine wasn't able to use them. Others theorized that NATO may have been supplying Ukraine with aircraft capable of launching HARM missiles, though that rumor was also a non-starter. Not only were Western nations wary of sending such equipment to Ukraine during the early months of Putin's invasion for fear of escalation, but Ukraine's pilots would have also needed a year or more of training to fly the aircraft in the first place. That training requirement is one of the reasons why it took until August 2024 for the first F-16 fighter jets to arrive in Ukraine. The jets were ready to go before that, but Ukraine's pilots needed to be ready to fly them. So if none of these rumors were true, how did Ukraine configure its Su-27s to fire HARM missiles? The answer, says Historic Wings, was that the US defense manufacturer Raytheon managed to do something that was previously thought impossible. And it didn't do it in the months after Putin invaded Ukraine. The reality was that Raytheon had already figured out how to make HARM missiles compatible with Soviet-era jets decades before Putin set his sights on Ukraine. And there's a strange reason why Raytheon put all of that work into building out this compatibility: Top Gun. No, not the 1980s blockbuster starring Tom Cruise, but the real-life Top Gun, with a healthy input from the US Air Force's Red Flag program. Historic Wings says that the Cold War period saw the US Department of Defense secretly acquire several of Russia's most important aircraft, likely including the Su-27 and the MiG-29, so they could be evaluated. These acquisitions were conducted under several code-named programs, which included such strange titles as Have Idea and even Have Donut. Historic Wings says that each of these programs worked with a different Russian aircraft, which were acquired through black market deals or in some cases, snatch-and-grab exercises. The US spent a lot of time and money on these programs. Then the Soviet Union collapsed, but far from deciding that its programs were through, the US went on a spending spree, buying up plenty more of these Soviet-era aircraft for study. Russia was even happy to sell older airframes to private buyers during this period. Under all of these programs, the US learned all that it needed to know about Russia's airframes. and that included figuring out how to install HARM missiles and other US-made weapons onto them. So Ukraine didn't have to come up with an ingenious solution to the compatibility issue, which marks one of the rare occasions when domestic innovation hasn't been responsible for a big Ukrainian win. The events of June 2nd and the seemingly many other undocumented uses of HARM missiles that have occurred throughout the war were made possible by a costly US program started decades ago. The details of precisely how the US managed to solve this compatibility problem have never been revealed. However, the aviationist has some theories in the September 2022 article we mentioned earlier. It says that an examination of photographs of both the MiG-29 and Su-27 seem to reveal that the US HARM missiles are being loaded onto the APU-470 missile launchers both jets have for firing their Russian-made R-27 AA-10 Alamo air-to-air missile. That means there's a little bit of using existing Russian technology coming into play. The same resource notes that an examination of a MiG-29's display shows that the aircraft recognizes the HARM missile as an R-27EP. This is an anti-radiation variation of the R-27 AA-10 Alamo air-to-air missile that has similar specifications to the HARM. That raises an interesting possibility. Ukraine's MiG-29 and Su-27s may not have even needed complex kits to configure their electronics. Instead, the aviationist says, both aircraft can use their own avionics without any complex modifications to fire HARM missiles. Perhaps this means the integration was far simpler than expected. Even if it was, Ukraine may have never discovered that integration was possible without the earlier studies conducted by the United States. HARM missiles likely arrived in Ukraine as early as August 2022, and perhaps before, because the US already knew they could be fired from Ukraine's fighter jets. Fast forward to today, and Ukraine is making very good use of that capability. We have our first video proof that Ukraine's Su-27s are both equipped with HARM missiles and that their pilots know exactly how to use them. The odds are that we're going to see many more confirmed HARM strikes in the coming months, now that Ukraine seems to be switching to a tactic of directly attacking Russia's air defense assets. Of course, Ukraine has more than one way to take out Russia's radars. In a single searing strike just a couple of days ago, it decimated a $50 million Russian radar system in the blink of an eye. Find out how by checking out our video on the strike, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show if you want more up-to-date videos covering the latest Ukrainian victories against Putin's forces.